Welcome to this week's installment of Inclusion Revolution here on Eastlink Television. We're really glad you could join us this week because this is probably one of the most important issues to me personally and one of the most misunderstood issues under the umbrella of disability, and that's a little bit about mental health. We're very lucky today to have Jackie Thornhill joining us. And in addition to just very close to completing her master's in social work, Jackie is also a mental health consumer and somebody who works within the community to support other people living with mental health and supporting them. So we're really pleased that Jackie has come because she wears many hats and has many really strong and positive opinions about how we can break the stigma around mental health. So welcome, Jackie.
Thanks, Tova.
We've known each other a long time, so it's fun just to have you here, first of all.
Yeah, it's nice.
And to have seen you, from my perspective as someone we've worked together in the past, and see how far you've come, how much you've done, both through education and through your employment work, and just in your own personal way in dealing with the fact that as a mental health consumer, you've taken the step to teach the world or to change the world in some ways, and I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, it's a really exciting opportunity to be here as well, and it's been quite a ride.
I'm sure it has.
Experiencing mental illness and mental health issues, and then going through the process of recovery, and then also simultaneously, developing a career in this field. So
I like that you said simultaneously, because you are managing and consistently managing, like anybody with any issue. We always manage it. I don't care if it's someone who smokes too much. I mean, we manage our thing, and then we continue to keep our life moving. And I think that's one of the strong messages not only you have to give to people who live with mental health, but to the family members and others who I often hear who go, what's going to happen to my son or daughter? And the answer is there's a lot of opportunity. And if we can overcome what I believe is the stigma of how people view mental health, and I know you feel very strongly about that as well. So let me ask you a starter question, and that is, you yourself growing up, having been identified as a person who lives with mental health, what were some of the stigmas or what were some of the barriers you really faced, whether in school, socially, or with your family?
Well, I was undiagnosed for most of my young adulthood until I was about 20. So my early years in university were quite difficult, and my late years of high school were extremely challenging. So not having any kind of understanding of what was wrong, why I couldn't do certain things that seemed so simple for other people, and dealing with the questions of my teachers or my parents or my friends about why I was so anxious about simple things like getting on the bus or getting up early in the morning, like things that just seemed completely impossible for me that people just did, and I watched people do all the time. And so I guess the biggest challenge was just not knowing what was wrong and not knowing how to understand it.
And does that create a sense of self-loathing? Because one of the things I see so much in people that I meet with mental health, and I went through myself growing up, was that sense of self-loathing, because you don't know what's kind of wrong or what's going on. You just know you're different, and you start to feel like there's something only like you're the only one there's something wrong with. And I wonder if you experienced that, especially previous to an appropriate diagnosis.
Yeah. Well, it was very frustrating to be in a position of comparing myself to my peers and seeing myself as being different, but not understanding why, and of seeing the things that I was afraid of or the things that I felt challenged by as being like totally odd and not really fitting in with what my actual life was like. I didn't really understand what was wrong, and so there was definitely a lot of self-consciousness and wanting to hide it. And realizing at many points that I wasn't able to, and people knowing,
especially when you don't know what it is,
and not being able to explain it to people because I didn't even know. So there's just a sense of being really weird.
I understand
and
that,
kind of not really fitting in anywhere. And in my relationships with my peers and my friends, it was really confusing to be having these difficulties, and then how I would relate to people would change. I would become extremely anxious or paranoid, or I'd think that somebody was out to get me or something.
Right.
And previous to that, I would be pretty relaxed and easygoing.
So that was very confusing
good sense of
to your
humor,
friends, and
people couldn't understand it. So when I finally dropped out of university because it just got to the point where I couldn't function, for all kinds of reasons, I kind of fell off the social circle that I was on for the years previous to that, and I, really didn't have any social connections.
So now you've almost got this social isolation happening, which we've talked about in previous shows. But I really believe in the case of mental health, especially when we don't know what's going on, social isolation is like a survival technique, because people are responding negatively to you, you're responding negatively to yourself, and you just don't want to have to deal with that. What about family? I mean, everybody's family's different.
Yeah.
But for a family trying to, I've always believed that there's a lot of families who want to believe it's not true because they also buy the stigma, and therefore a lot of them don't want to deal with it and don't want to know and just would rather you quietly go in your room. And that's a really tough thing, and I see a lot of that happening with my clients. There's a lot of great parents who are really engaged, want to work with their children, really figure out what's going on and learn all they can to be the best parent they can. But there's also some parents who the only way they learned about, of course, mental health was Law and Order. We've talked about, these 1 week shows that tell you, they always talk about the extreme case.
Yeah.
So what was going on, if you can tell a little bit about the experience with the family and how they responded to that, especially before things were clear?
Yeah, I think it was extremely overwhelming for my family, and I think, as we know with most illnesses, they kind of go along and things are difficult and challenging, but people are able to kind of manage, and then suddenly something really stressful happens, or there's some kind of situation in their lives, and suddenly everyone starts to realize that something's really wrong. And so when that happened in my family, my parents weren't expecting it. It wasn't something that they were prepared for. And it was almost like one day they had this daughter who was an active student in university and who was relatively healthy and was working and doing all these things, and then within a short period of time I was quitting school, not working, and on disability, and I couldn't I didn't feel like I could do anything.
So they were in shock, basically, first and foremost.
And it was what do we do? And then there was also the confusion of I wasn't always making decisions that were clear, and so they were kind of walking this balance of how do we protect you from getting hurt or something bad happening to you, but also how do we give you the freedom to kind of go and live your life and not feel like you have to live this illness, And
that's a real tightrope all caregivers, I guess, family members and caregivers give, and the individuals living with mental health, is am I being clear and am I making the right decisions, and when do those caregivers step in? I actually had a parent call me recently, tell me she's concerned about her son, and she asked me on the phone, when do I make that step to maybe contact the hospital, because I really think we're going in a very tough place. And I said to her, that's the question, isn't it? But every parent faces that when the child, especially in the teens, when we really see onset of different types of mental illness really coming out, we really see our parents kind of going, what's going on? And
I've just now started to realize that, now that I'm, older and I'm in a really good space in my life, I'll have these reflective conversations with my mom about those times, which, was probably about 7 years ago.
Right.
And she'll tell me these stories of how incredibly difficult it was for her to understand what was going on and how hard it was to watch me go through that.
And did she blame herself?
No.
So that's great, because I do see a lot of people going, what did I do? Or, where did this come from? And, I always like to tell everybody, whether you're rich, poor, great job, no job, it doesn't matter. Mental health illness is possible for everybody, and nobody chooses it. I always say it's like heart conditions. It's a series of diseases in the heart, and frankly, mental health is a series of diseases in the brain. I mean, that's essentially what we're talking about, and nobody ever asks for it.
No.
So I'm really interested in, because you go from being almost the victim or feeling a victim because not understanding it, but then you were one of the people that really, once you understood what needed to be done, you started to proceed to do it, and then became essentially an advocate for other people in your role, and of course in your pursuit through social, as for your master's in social work and your work at Clubhouse Connection. So that's always really, really impressed me. Connections Clubhouse. I do that, and forgive me. So with that work that you've been doing, it's really wonderful to see somebody really go through that phase from where you're simply that person living with a disability to somebody who's supporting people who don't necessarily get it or in that place you used to be, and you bring so much to that table. So when we come back, I'd really like to talk about Jackie the advocate, Jackie the person who's changing the world, and Jackie the person who was a role model, in my opinion and many people's opinion, to so many people with disability, because the possibilities are always there, and Inclusion Revolution, that's what it's really all about for us, is to talk about successes and strategies and what's coming and how to take what looks like a pretty difficult situation and turn it into a situation that can be magnificent and allow you to contribute to the world just the way everybody else should. So when we come back here on Eastlink Television on Inclusion Revolution, Jackie Thornhill is going to explain to us why she's such a great role model. We'll be right back.